Detroit Lions have named their new running back coach, and it is Tashard Choice from the Texas Longhorns. So let's get right into it. So the Detroit Lions continue to build out their coaching staff, and today they named their new running backs coach. Now, you may be asking yourself, wait, I thought we had a running backs coach. Isn't that Scottie Montgomery? It was. But essentially, the Detroit Lions are going to be moving Scottie Montgomery to the wide receiver coach position to replace Antoine Randall L., who is headed off to the Chicago Bears. Now, I actually saw this news kind of late, so bear with me. I apologize. Before we get into that, I do want to start with Scottie Montgomery moving to the Lions wide receiver coach position. I assume he's going to retain the title as also assistant head coach. I always thought it was kind of weird how Scottie Montgomery became a running backs coach, especially that he became that in the NFL with the Indianapolis Colts. That was the first time he was ever listed as a running backs coach anywhere. He didn't play the running back position, so I always thought it was strange that his next stop was as a running back coach with the Indianapolis Colts. But I always thought it spoke to the coach that he was, the type of character that he had. Much others around the league respected him to bring him in as a running backs coach, even though he had never coached that position before. Now, he had worked with offenses as a whole. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's been an associate head coach at the college level, but he's mainly focused on the passing game side of things as a passing game coordinator, a wide receiver coach to get things started when he returned to Duke after playing at Duke in college, as well as working with quarterbacks directly as a quarterback coach. He's always kind of had his stakes in the offense in terms of the passing game, and you can see that here by the history as a coach, specifically at the college level. And I had put these graphics together back. We were talking about potentially having Scottie Montgomery as our next offensive coordinator because I thought he had a legitimate case within our own organization just because of the experience that he had had at the college level. And a lot of the numbers spoke to the kind of pass game impact that he had specifically. But even if you go back with Duke, when he became the offensive coordinator, difficult in college to just go stats by stats. So you have to add the context. So definitely go check out my video on Scottie Montgomery if you want to know more about Scottie Montgomery and some of the details there. He starts off with Duke, working as the receiver coach. Then he goes to Pittsburgh Steelers. He was with Mike Tomlin, which is a heck of a gig to get into immediately. And then when he returned to Duke, became their offensive coordinator in 2014. And a lot of the numbers suggested that they did a really good job within the passing game. Now with Duke, there was a lot of success in the rushing attack, but offensively, they put up a ton of yards. They had a fantastic season in 2014, 421 points that season. That was the second most in history at 32.4 points per game at the time. They were ranked at number 19 at that point in the season. It was a great year. To kind of quickly touch on this whole situation, this was a situation that was kind of bound to fail. There was a lot of questions at why they even fired their head coach initially, like why they even did that. Didn't make any sense. And he was kind of in a position that it just wasn't really going to be successful, and it wasn't successful for East Carolina as a whole, as a team. But with Scottie Montgomery as their head coach, we did see that their passing game was fantastic. I mean, 12th in terms of yards per game passing in his second season in 2017 in the country. The first season, it was sixth most. I mean, you can see the completion percentage, the touchdowns per game. Look at the yards per game, 42, 57th. I mean, offensively, they were definitely successful. They were setting records, and a lot of it came through the passing attack, even when he landed with Maryland next as working as the quarterback's coach, but also the offensive coordinator. A lot of the standout statistics here were what he did with the passing game specifically. So I always thought it was kind of strange that he became then the running back coach with Indianapolis. Now, it seems like he did a pretty good job because the Lions brought him in as a running back coach as well. But again, I think that's a respect around the league too of like, hey, this is a very good football coach. Wherever it is offensively, he's a very good football mind. Offensively, he can command a room. We saw a lot of the clips from the Indianapolis Colts, but I just always thought it was strange. But when he stepped in, Jonathan Taylor had his career season that first season immediately. We got to see the pass game specifically. We got to see the influence on that. For him, it was the influence of Jonathan Taylor and protecting the football initially in terms of limiting some of the fumbles that we did see. But he has his best season of his career. And then, of course, when he was with us, when he's been with us as our running backs coach, I mean, there's no doubt he's done a great job over the last two seasons just by looking at what our running backs have accomplished on their own. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, of course, this past season was electric. I thought about the Indianapolis Colts game, weird enough. It was like that was the game he kind of took off. And then as the season went on, the pass game really took off. And I always thought that Scottie Montgomery, you can even go back. I think I did the show on Bleacher Report, so I'm not just saying this now. I always talked about how I thought his ability to impact running backs and their development in the passing game was something that was always notable because his background was with that typically. And I think we saw that this year. I mean, we can point to maybe some of the reason why Jahmyr Gibbs took off as a pass catcher and his route running and the development that took place there was because you had Scottie Montgomery working with running backs who understood the receiver position and he knew how to run routes. And then you also, of course, have Dave Montgomery, who was fantastic in the pass game. 37 targets, 36 of them receptions, graded as the best running back in football in terms of receiving. Not only did Gibbs take off as a runner, and he was really top 15, top 10 across the board statistically, whatever you wanted to look at, but also as a pass catcher, he took off this past season. And obviously, Dave Montgomery continues to be very good for us. And then you had Sione Vaki, who I was really excited about. One of my things with moving him to offensive coordinator, we discussed it, was I don't really want to lose him to offensive coordinator and take him out of being able to work with the running backs because I want to see what he can do with Sione Vaki. I want to see that development because I think his pass game is his biggest impact. When we drafted Gibbs, I thought he could be special in the pass game. I think Sione Vaki can absolutely be special in the pass game, and I think that's why we saw it immediately. So it was the perfect pairing between him and Scottie Montgomery. Now, hopefully that continues with this new running backs coach that the Detroit Lions have brought in. There's definitely a connection. I'm sure everybody has talked about it by now, but that is that our new running backs coach did work with Jahmyr Gibbs at Georgia Tech before he ultimately transferred to Alabama. But I think what stood out to me the most, and I threw in some passing game stats that I'll touch on here as well that maybe won't also show up on the screen, but it's the amount of guys that he's also worked with that have gotten into the NFL. So you look at Tashard Choice, who played the running back position, was in the NFL as a running back, went to Oklahoma in college, had a successful career, got into the NFL, played for a few different teams. In terms of coaching, North Texas in 2018 for a single season, and getting to Georgia Tech. He was there between 2019 and 2021, and then to Texas. And to be honest, you talk about working with running backs, that's like the top. I mean, that's peak in terms of working with running backs at the college level when you think about the type of recruits that they're getting. Not only are you getting dogs from Texas, but you're also getting the best around the country because that running back room has just been loaded over the last few years, and that's continued. But what stood out to me is the guys that he's worked with. So, for example, North Texas, he gets there the year after Wilson, who ends up being an NFL running back. Wilson leaves. So Wilson leaves. He steps in 2018. You have a guy like Torrey. Torrey was a transfer from community college. I mean, he was averaging 7.7 yards per carry at the community college level. Ended up getting a couple of offers very early. One of those schools were North Texas. So obviously they were able to notice and recognize the talent. And he was also one of the undersized running backs. I believe he's like 5'10", 190. That's why maybe some teams were concerned at the time initially out of high school bring him in. But he was fantastic. They bring him in. Torrey has a successful season. He ends up in the UFL at one point. He actually got a trial for Philly and actually got signed through that. Didn't last much longer than that, but he did get signed. And now most recently, he's actually in the CFL. A guy like Easley that season, averaging 5.2 yards per carry, 386 yards from Stephen F. Austin. And look, I guess there were some off-the-field things there. I didn't really understand what it was about, but I guess there were some off-the-field issues, and it was like, okay, maybe it was time for both teams to move on. So they bring in Easley, who was the lead back for Stephen F. Austin. He comes in, 386 yards, but the key to that is that he was rolling, unfortunately, due to a torn ACL. It cut his season short. He had a 2-game stretch with 49 carries for 287 yards, but he ends up tearing his ACL, which was the same injury that he also had going back to high school, which is awful. I hate to hear about that, to have that same ACL injury. So that cut it short when he was off to a fantastic start. He goes to Georgia Tech, and he's working with Jordan Mason, who we know in the NFL this past season over 700 yards rushing with San Francisco. Now, they had a lot of injuries, but it led to an opportunity. He's been in the league for multiple seasons. Jordan Mason working with him directly, 5.2 a carry, about 900 yards. That's an NFL running back that he helped get to the next level. You go on to the next season, you got Jahmyr Gibbs. We know the story there, right? First-round pick. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs was a talented player coming out of high school, four-star recruit that was from Georgia, so he ends up going to Georgia Tech. Mason, for example, was a 3-star recruit out of Tennessee. Jahmyr Gibbs ends up going to Alabama. We know what that turned into. And again, I thought when going through the film for Jahmyr Gibbs when we initially drafted him, because I went back to watch Georgia Tech and Alabama, and I thought that he was more involved in the pass game there. I thought his potential in the pass game showed up more with Georgia Tech than it did with Alabama. Like, there was flashes with Alabama, like against Kansas State, but it was like that showed up what he could be in the passing game. So he's seemingly gotten that kind of production out of his guys as well at the college level, which is something that I'm kind of focused on because we're losing Scottie Montgomery for that role specifically. So it's just one of those things that I'm really keeping my eye on through 2021. And then he goes to Texas. And I mean, my goodness, just look at the list of running backs we have here. Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson has his best season of his college career. 1,500 yards, 6.1 yards per carry. Not much that needs to be said. Most rushing yards of his career. They also had Roschon Johnson, another NFL running back, Chicago Bears. The dude was the backup, got drafted by Chicago. Still on Chicago, 6 yards per carry, 500 yards. And you think about it, like Roschon Johnson, again, was not a massive recruit. He was a 3-star that was from Texas. Bijan was a 5-star running back. You also had Jonathan Brooks, then that comes into the fold, a 4-star running back from Texas as well. Jonathan Brooks, another NFL running back, now with the Carolina Panthers. He was a day 2 pick. The first season we got to see him 6.6 yards per carry, about 200 yards, but they were so loaded. I mean, Keelan Robinson, who was another guy. I mean, last year's draft class, I don't think he was actually drafted. I think he went undrafted, but he was someone I was interested towards the end of the draft because he was a high recruit that it never really worked out, but he was part of that loaded running back room as well. You then go to 2023. Jonathan Brooks then takes over. The guy has 1,100 rushing yards. Goes from a first season, we don't see him a ton. Second year, he has the opportunity, steps in, becomes the guy, 6.1 a carry. Then enter a guy like Jaden Blue into the mix at his freshman season at 37 yards. Now he jumps it up to 398 yards in his second season. By the time he gets to his third season, the guy has 730 yards this past year, which was the last year with Texas. That, of course, we'll see Tashard Choice because now he's with the Lions. TJ Baxter in the mix, season as a 5-star recruit. You also have a guy like Trey Wisner, who we should throw in here as well. That was a freshman in 2023. Then, of course, in 2024, he takes off. 44 receptions, 311 yards. He has over 1,000 yards rushing that season. Truth is, he's put a lot of guys into the next level. So we've seen that development from that sense. And if you get a job at Texas, you're probably doing something right. So I'm excited about this because this just makes sense from a rushing perspective that you would do this. But I definitely don't have anything bad to say about what Scottie Montgomery did. I just think it speaks a ton to the guy like, yeah, let's just move you to wide receiver coach now. You got that. And I'm actually a little bit more excited maybe in some ways about what Scottie could bring to that room because I think we got to see kind of flashes of what that could be for the running back room. I'm just hoping that continues within the running back room specifically now going forward. But it could be good for a guy like Sione Vaki, right? It could be good for a piece like that that's kind of a unique style as a rusher.
I mean, I think a guy like Vaki is perfect for what this running back situation is. I mean, Vaki's kind of like a freshman in some ways. I mean, this was a piece that didn't have many carries whatsoever, was in the 30s in college, looks kind of unique in his rushing style because it's not really his background. Went to safety, he looked pretty awesome at running back. Lions took him, made him a running back, played receiver in high school. I think it's an excellent opportunity for him to really mold that kind of young piece into what it could turn into. Plus, we got to see that there is awareness, whether that was recruiting the right running backs or also even a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, where Gibbs kind of just took over immediately as the running back. An awareness of like, okay, he's the best on a roster. Let's make sure we're giving the right guy carries here. Maybe not just the guy that was here before.
Be a coach like this can help kind of push him into that next level. We know what Monty is. Gibbs took off towards the second half of last season. I still think there's things he could improve upon. I thought against Minnesota at times his pacing was off. But we saw the pass game. So this could actually help with him more of the rushing sense potentially with some of these guys, more so than maybe Scottie Montgomery even did. So this could be a perfect opportunity to get some overlap between you had a guy that's great in the pass game, not trying to diminish anything he did with the rushing attack, and now you had a guy that is a running back coach that played the position. This could actually work well on both fronts. So I think this is exciting. Tashard Choice, Lions new running back coach. I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'm out.